Journalists on the continent are continuing to fight for freedom of speech and access to information. Is the continent regressing on media freedom? Here in the SADC region, the case of Hopewell Chi'nono in Zimbabwe has drawn international interest after he was again arrested but has since been granted bail. To get an update on his case, we are now joined by Hopewell Chi'nono from Harare in Zimbabwe. Good evening and welcome to African Perspective, Hopewell. I first want to say, though, that looking at your bookshelf right there behind you, that you also owe us a book, considering how many times you've been to prison.
No, thank you very much, Adrian, for having me on the program. I think I should be writing a book about my experiences because it's very rare in Southern Africa for journalists to be thrown in prison for simply telling the truth and exposing corruption, but that is what has happened to me. Mm-hmm. So a book is due.
A book is due, but also your own personal experiences in the prison cells of Zimbabwe, and a lot of reports have always been there around the conditions of what the prisoners are being subjected to in the prison cells of Zimbabwe. But now, as a journalist having first-hand experience of that, we will get to your case in a moment, but I just want you to speak to about those conditions that you were under when you were arrested and remanded in custody, and also speak about the 45 days the previous case that you were under arrest for.
The prison conditions in Zimbabwe's jails are horrible. You wouldn't wish them on your worst enemy. I was in Chikurubi Maximum Prison, which is the most notorious prison in Zimbabwe, where they send rapists, murderers, and I was classified as a dangerous prisoner. Yet I was in there for a crime which came out of journalism. I was living in a cell meant for 16 people, but we were about 46 of us sleeping in this cell. There was no running water. We were in this cell for 17 hours, from 3 in the afternoon to the next day. There is one toilet. There's no flashing water in the toilet, so it's a breeding ground for diseases. In fact, the first time when I was in prison, I spent 45 days, and I came out with a terrible cold. I was shivering. There was no medication in the prison hospital. When my private doctor came to see me whilst I was at Chikurubi prison, he simply wanted to check my BP, and the prison could not provide a high blood pressure checking machine. That's how bad things are. The diet is terrible. They are fed badly cooked sadza cornmeal with boiled beans in the afternoon, and the same cornmeal with boiled cabbages in the evening. People suffer from pellagra, which is a disease which comes when you have a bad diet, and there's simply a terrible reality unfolding there, and it's directly linked to the corruption, the looting of public funds, the plundering of the nation's natural resources that I always talk about. This money, which is meant for prisons, is not getting there. A lot of the Mnangagwa regime bureaucrats and enablers are driving around in Land Cruisers, and yet just one Land Cruiser could fix the prison hospital at Chikurubi.
Okay, and one of the descriptions that you gave one of the media houses, you said that people sleep like rats.
It's as bad as that. I mean, I was, as I explained earlier, that I was in a cell meant for 16 people, and yet we were 46. You can't even tell, Adrian, that's how bad it is. People will be breathing into each other, and people will be sweating into each other. It's really bad. If the world saw what is happening in Zimbabwe's prisons, it will be disgusted. That's how bad it is.
Yeah. Is there from your end, because having this conversation with you is that you're no longer just the Hopewell Chi'nono that everybody just knew to be an investigative reporter, an award-winning reporter pre-being arrested in July 2020. But now you are Hopewell Chi'nono, who has been incarcerated by the ZANU-PF regime, to put it bluntly. Not the first time, now the second time as well. Is there any activism role that you would be taking on behalf of some of these prisoners who are subjected to the state that you've just described?
Yeah, I've been writing articles. When I went into prison the first time, I wrote about 5 or 6 articles for a local newspaper here and for international media across the globe, in South Africa, in Britain, and in America, conscientizing the global audience, the global citizens of the system and the situation in Zimbabwe's prisons. And I'm glad to say there's some traction. Some people are donating things, but even donating goods to the prison service, it's a gam. It's a real sport. They need to explain why you're donating, who you are, your political beliefs. That's how bad it is. It's a proper Leninist state, the way things are being run here. Mm-hmm. They would rather at times go without than receiving from someone like Hopewell Chi'nono, because I'm perceived to be someone who's anti-state. When I'm not, I'm simply telling the truth and exposing corruption.
Okay, and then there comes that other conversation as well, because some in ZANU-PF have accused you of being an enemy of the state, and that is that your situation being used by the opposition in Zimbabwe to argue and say that this is the state of Zimbabwe and this is how the Zimbabwean government is treating its citizens. And I know I've asked you this question before, and I'm going to ask you again. Is there no fear that your situation could be used as a political football?
I've never looked at it that way, because corruption affects everybody, regardless of whether you're ZANU-PF or whether you are a Movement for Democratic Change Alliance. A lot of people that speak to me privately do so from both parties. I actually get sometimes calls from people in Mnangagwa's government. I get calls from hardcore ZANU-PF supporters, because when you fall sick, it does not matter whether you're ZANU-PF or whether you're MDC. Our hospitals are in such a terrible situation at the moment. We have the biggest hospital in Zimbabwe, which has only 2 operating maternity theaters. They were built in 1977 by the colonial government. Only one of these maternity theaters is working. It affects every woman who's pregnant, regardless of whether they're MDC or they're ZANU-PF. 2,500 Zimbabwean women are dying every year. That's 15 jumbo jets crashing every year and killing pregnant Zimbabwean women. That's unacceptable. And people who are coming from both sides of the political aisle understand that this is not a partisan issue. This is an issue which is about us as citizens, as Zimbabweans. And we are looking at the future and what we are going to bestow to our kids. We are leaving nothing. And it affects everybody, regardless of whether they're in the ruling party or whether they are in the opposition.
Yeah, you have called your arrest also a persecution. Have you been in conversation with any person within the state, whether it is the police or the security minister, or whether it is even the president himself?
I've spoken to, the second time when I was arrested, when I go to the police station, some of the police officers were saying, we are sorry, we're doing this under orders. This is not the kind of policing that we ordinarily do or we are expected to do. We are very sorry. When they speak to you privately, they acknowledge that what I'm doing is the right thing, but they tell you also that they are working on orders from the top. These are political orders that are coming from the top. Just before I was arrested in July, the ZANU-PF political party, its communications machinery, put out a statement through a press conference saying that I had crossed the line, I had criticized the family of the president. So it's a political arrest that took place in July, and again that took place when I was arrested in November. It's persecution. Yeah. That's what it is.
So when these police officers are telling you that the orders are coming from the top, how high up at the top? Does it go all the way to the president, or does it go all the way to the minister?
Well, the president was aware of my arrest when I was arrested the first time. Yep. He acknowledged to a couple of people that spoke to me that he knew that I was going to be arrested, and he said that I'd crossed the line.
Wait. So you heard this from who?
I can't reveal the sources because I'll be endangering them. But these are people that are within the state that were telling me that it goes right up to the top, because these are political issues, and they will not be dealt with by ordinary police officers without getting the nod from the top.
Yep.
And as I said earlier, ZANU-PF put out its national spokesperson just before I was arrested to say that I had crossed the line.
Yeah.
So this is political. Police officers are just being made to do this.
Would you then say that the president is directly involved in your arrest?
He is aware of my arrest, and the fact that he does nothing about it, it means that he agrees with my arrest.
Okay, so that's the summation that you come down to, but you don't have any evidence whatsoever that the president is directly involved in your arrest or what you call persecution?
No, you don't need to get evidence. If a political party which is in power sends out its national spokesperson, Patrick Chinamasa, to come after me personally as a journalist for the work that I've been doing as a journalist, and accuses me of to quote him of trashing the family of the president. Yep. It means that it's coming from the top. He would never have done that if it was not coming from the top.
So that comment was a comment that came, this was during July, right?
This was just before I was arrested.
Okay. So then you are arrested again quite recently. And this was again somebody who is a relative of, this is in relation to somebody who is a relative of the president, Henrietta Rushawa, who is Zimbabwe's Zimbabwe's Miners Federation head, who was arrested for trying to smuggle out gold out of the country.
Yes, what happened was this lady was arrested at Robert Mugabe International Airport trying to board a flight to Dubai. She had 6 kgs of gold. And I had gotten information that bail was not going to be opposed. And when I tweeted that, that became the crime. And that's what got me arrested. We are losing $100 million worth of gold through smuggling every month in Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. And that amounts to about 2 years worth of running our central hospitals across the country. We are losing $1.2 billion to $1.5 billion worth of gold every year through smuggling. That could run all our central hospitals in Zimbabwe for 24 years. Yeah. So it was a matter of public interest. That's why I dealt with it in the way that I did. Yeah. But I can't say much about it because one of my bail conditions is that I shouldn't say what they termed, I shouldn't talk about what they termed anything to do with obstructing justice. But that's what I can say in regards to that case. Okay.
I'm going to ask you another question, and please feel free not to answer if you feel that it could get you into trouble. And that is, do you have any evidence whatsoever? Because in your tweets, you argue that there is corruption from the NPA side, the prosecutorial side. There is corruption. Do you have any evidence whatsoever that the top of the ZANU-PF party, whether it is the president or any other senior political figure in ZANU-PF, is involved in trying to cushion the blow against Henrietta?
I can't comment again because this is a case which is before the courts. But what I can say is that there is a sitting judge in Zimbabwe who deposed an affidavit in the High Court talking about how she said she was being told how to rule in bail cases by the Chief Justice. But in regards to my case, I can't say much because I'll be going against my bail conditions.
Okay, let's then quickly just touch on the international community. So there was a message that came from the EU ambassador to Zimbabwe, Tim Olkonen, who said that Hopewell Chi'nono's detention sends a chilling signal on freedom of opinion and expression in Zimbabwe. Exposing corruption is not a crime. The fight against corruption is declared a government priority. However, though, I want to know about the international community as far as speaking about the neighbors of Zimbabwe, on whether or not we speak about other countries on the continent or even the African Union for that matter. Do you feel that their silence is loud?
I think their silence is very loud. I'll start with South Africa. South Africa is Zimbabwe's biggest trading partner. It can exert some pressure. There is historical evidence to this. In 1975 to 77, Vorster was pushed by the international community to put pressure on the Ian Smith government. Vorster's actions led to what we now know as the Lancaster House Conference, because Smith realized that he had no allies in the repression and the colonial business that he was engaged in Rhodesia. And the fact that South Africa is quiet about these things, or maybe they make some noises in their diplomatic circles, the problem is that Zimbabweans now pour into South Africa looking for jobs. It's human nature for Zimbabweans to go where they can get a living and feed their families. And this is what is now breeding the fights that are taking place in South Africa, what we know as xenophobia, because South Africans, some of them in townships, are not as sophisticated as you and I. They now believe that Zimbabweans are taking their jobs. And this is a problem which has been created in Zimbabwe. If Zimbabwe was being run properly, Zimbabweans would not go to South Africa. And if South Africa was behaving in a way which is dignified in how it relates with its neighbor, telling its neighbor that this is wrong, you need to adhere to your constitution, you need to reduce or stop your corruption, then things would have been different. But we are where we are today because there is a blind eye. The guys in SADC, the presidents in SADC, they don't talk against each other. They don't do it even in private, because we engage with some of them and we get to know what's being discussed. So at African Union level, I would have expected them to say, you cannot do this. You cannot throw journalists in prison. You cannot loot public funds meant for COVID, is what happened. In fact, one of the exposures that I put out related to $60 million US, which was being looted, which was meant for COVID. And yet our hospitals were shut down.
Yeah. Okay, Hopewell, I just want to point out something that troubled me a bit that you said earlier on about people living in the township, that they're not sophisticated as you and I. I beg to differ that it's not an issue about sophistication at all, but it is a lived reality for many South Africans that they find that jobs that they feel that could have been their jobs are jobs now being taken by Zimbabwean nationals. And that's the reason that they are in the country. So I hope that you accept that it's not an issue around sophistication. But let's move over to this point. So the date for the trial with regards to the first charges that you face has now been set for the 7th of December. One of the issues that you'd raised before was around the presiding officer, Ngoni Nduna, that he must be recused from this particular trial. What has the ruling been with regards to that?
Well, he made a ruling that he's not going to recuse himself. And what we have done now is that we have taken the ruling for review in the High Court, and we're waiting for the High Court to rule. I just want to go back to what you said. When I referred to sophistication, I was not talking about you and I being much smarter. Okay. I was talking about you and I understanding the economic nuances that breed the problems that we face in our economies. Someone who's living in a township in Zimbabwe might not understand the relatedness of things in terms of, say, for instance, how corruption affects the standard of living in townships. You and I understand this because this is our work. That is what I was referring to.
Okay. And then just the final one. Who are paying your legal fees? Because now you've got two cases that we are speaking about.
Fortunately, in Zimbabwe, we've got what's called the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights. It's a legal fund that funds legal cases like mine. If people are beaten up, it takes care of that. If people like myself are thrown into prison for issues related to our work, this fund comes and it takes care of those things. So I've been fortunate enough, and many of us in Zimbabwe have been fortunate enough that the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights have been in existence for almost now 24 years.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Hopewell, thank you so much for your time, and really appreciate that you made time to speak to us. And like I said again the other time, continue doing the work that you're doing, man. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's great to be on SABC. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That is Hopewell Chi'nono there, investigative reporter in Zimbabwe, who's speaking about his release. He's out now on bail, but the 7th of December has been set for the trial, and this is in relation to an accusation that he tried to overthrow the ZANU-PF-led government.